Spike ball things are hard to store. Walls are a good place for them.
Yeah, honestly, we just put like a sticky hook on the wall.
Yeah.
Sticky hook.
Yeah, they take up an incredible amount of space on the floor and almost no space in the room if you hang them on your wall, Cyrus. Because Lucas is a genius.
Cyrus.
Lucas is a genius.
He's a genius. I'll give him that.
All right. All right, let's get started. I am going to, here's what I'm going to do. I just took a screenshot of where my tiles in the Zoom meeting are. And I'm going to just, actually, let me take a more updated one. I'm just going to ask everyone, whether you're a visitor or whether you are a student who's ordinarily in the class, to just introduce yourself. So let me just share with you in the chat the screenshot of the members of the class, and we can all introduce ourselves, yeah? Give me a moment here. Let's see, hang on. We're still getting more people coming in. So let me wait another minute before I share this screenshot. All right, here we go. Wow, we got a lot of guests today. This is going to take a long time to introduce ourselves, but it's important. So we'll just do it as quick as possible. Maybe I'll ask you just to tell me your name and your hometown, and we'll leave it at that, okay? So if you go to the chat field, you'll find an attachment with a picture of my screen. And so let's just go across reading like a book, starting with Cyrus. He'll introduce himself. Nice, Cyrus, looking good. And then I'll introduce myself, and we'll just keep reading down until we get to Addison at the bottom there to introduce themselves. Is everybody clear? All right, we'll be quick about it. Go ahead, Cyrus.
All right, I'm Cyrus, and I'm actually from Middletown, Delaware, because I'm a faculty kid at St. Andrews.
I'm Mr. O'Connell. I guess I'm from Chatham, New Jersey, but I've been living here at St. Andrews for the past 21 years. Emma Hunter, I think who's next? Let's see. Emma Hunter? Has everybody opened up the attachment to see the order?
I'm Emma Hunter, and I'm from Easton, Maryland.
All right.
I'm Brooke Estes, and I'm from San Francisco, California.
Hello, I'm Christopher Onsamu, and I'm from Townsend, Delaware, which is right across from Middletown.
Welcome, Christopher.
My name is Camilo, and I'm from Brooklyn, New York.
Welcome, Camilo.
My name's Leah Horgan, and I'm from Wilmington, Delaware.
Welcome, Leah.
My name is Quinn Avery, and I'm from Monmouth County, New Jersey.
My name is Lucas Okus, and I'm from Phoenixville, Pennsylvania.
My name is Prem Patel, and I'm from San Francisco, California as well.
Hi, my name's Lucy Mettler, and I'm from Charleston, South Carolina.
Hi, my name's actually Magnus, and I'm from Geneva, Switzerland.
Welcome, Magnus.
My name's Finn, and I'm from New York City.
Welcome, Finn.
My name's Madeline Bolno, and I'm from Marblehead, Massachusetts.
Welcome, Madeline.
My name's also Finn, and I live right here in Middletown, Delaware.
My name's Amanda, and I'm from Baltimore, Maryland.
Welcome, Amanda.
I'm Virginia Avery, and I'm from Monmouth County, New Jersey.
Welcome, Virginia.
Hi, I'm Ingrid Tuvison, and I am from a small town in Indiana called Batesville.
I'm Claire, and I'm from Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Welcome, Claire.
I'm Addie, and I'm from New York City.
And I'm Emma, and I'm from Virginia.
All right. There may be a couple of more people that entered the room late. Does anybody else feel like introducing themselves?
Yeah, sorry, I was having Wi-Fi issues, but I'm Claire Louise, and I'm from North Carolina.
Well, okay. Thanks, Claire.
Hi, I'm actually Frankie. That's just my sister and her friend's name on the screen. And I'm from Washington, D.C.
Welcome, Frankie. All right. If no one else feels like introducing themselves, that's fine. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen with you. I'm also going to share a link to the document that I'll be working from. So if you go to the chat field, you'll find the document that I'm sharing on my screen as a link. You can use it to look at later if you like, but you can also look at it now with me. And
for me, it says you need access. And
is it still saying that?
Yeah, it says, I don't know.
Oh, you know what it is? People from who aren't with St. Andrews. Hang on, let me change the permissions. Okay. Let's see. Sorry. Anyone with the link. Okay, there we go. Okay. You don't need to have the file open. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna share my screen with you. So so everyone should be now looking at this document in my shared screen. And we're going to be talking about a relatively straightforward idea today. We're just going to ask this simple question. Why do different things live in different places? There's a fancy word for this question. Does anyone want to give me the fancy name for the habit of asking or the process of asking this question? Where do different things live? What's the pattern of life, geographically speaking? The geographic pattern of biological things is called biogeography. All right. Okay, so who can answer the first question? Why do living things differ in where they live? Well, before you try that, let me just, I know it won't be difficult to persuade you that gorillas and lions and caribou live in different places. You're already really familiar. Here's a picture showing polar bears live in this red part of the world and they don't live anywhere else. And here's where red kangaroos live, in Australia and nowhere else. This fact is probably already pretty familiar to you, that in fact, you probably know that kangaroos and what other kinds of animals seem to be especially abundant in Australia. What class of mammal is abundant in Australia?
Marsupials.
Yeah, the marsupials, right? There's koalas, there's wallabies, there's kangaroos, and there aren't a lot of what we call placental mammals in Australia. You should be maybe wondering about that. Why do different things live in different places? That's the question for today. Okay, does anyone want to ask a clarifying question before we move on? Does anyone want to offer another biogeographic example before we move on?
Penguins, maybe?
Yes, excellent. Excellent, Lucy. Tell me more. Where do we find penguins?
You can find them in Antarctica, but they're also in like the Galapagos Islands.
Okay. Yeah, we can find them in the southern hemisphere. They are mostly in the far south, including Antarctica. That's correct. There are places like Antarctica in the north, but no penguins. And in the same way, those polar bears in the north are not found in similar environments in the south. There are no polar bears in Antarctica. And there are no penguins in the Arctic. And of course, there are no penguins in the Amazon jungle. So how do we explain the absence of penguins in the Amazon jungle? That part is relatively easy. And if you've been in this course all year long, you should be able to answer that because it was one of the first things we studied. How do you explain, using the document example here, a really simple example like, why aren't there whales in the jungle?
Because of their environment.
Say a little bit more there, Quinn.
Certain species thrive in different kinds of environments. Like you wouldn't find a whale on the shore or on land.
Right.
But you wouldn't find deer in the ocean.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because different animals and plants have adapted to different environments, right? Right, Quinn? So in the little cartoon there, the whale is saying, I don't have the body for this, right? Okay. And there are lots of other examples you can read about. But here's where things start to get more interesting. You may know that if you, so one explanation for biogeography is everything is in its perfect location because everything is perfectly adapted to a particular environment, and all around the world, the environments are different, and the Arctic is different from the Antarctic, and therefore penguins wouldn't do well in the Arctic, and polar bears wouldn't do well in the Antarctic, and kangaroos wouldn't do well in Texas. Are you with me? Okay, how do we know that explanation is not adequate, is not true? Yes, Christopher.
A wild guess, but maybe like it hasn't been tested. Like,
Oh no, it has been tested. We've tested this unintentionally all too many times, far too many times. Is it Camillo?
Yeah. So maybe the animals aren't adapted to that environment and they haven't evolved to live in that environment.
Okay, you're making a strong point that different things are found in different places because they're adapted to that environment. But my question is, how do we know that that doesn't fully explain biogeography? How do we know that it's true that trees don't grow in a lake and whales don't live in a forest? And the reason for that is each of those organisms is adapted to different types of environment, yes? Okay, but we also know that you can see many, many, many exceptions to this rule. How do we know? This is, let me maybe put the question into the chat just so it's really clear for you to see. Oh no, I can't put the chat up when I'm in screen share. Well, it's on the screen here. Maybe someone could read observation 3. Could someone just read the first sentence in observation 3?
When organisms from one location are relocated to another, they sometimes thrive.
Ah, think about that for a second. Can you think of an example of an organism that when relocated from its native habitat to a non-native environment has thrived?
Spotted lanternflies would be a good example.
Okay, I don't know much about that, Lucas. Where are they from? Do you know? They're from somewhere else is all we need.
I believe they're from Asia, and recently they were brought over in like a shipping container or something on accident.
Yeah, and the environment where they came from, it turns out, is a harder place for them to thrive than the environment that they were introduced into. Other examples?
I know you can't open chat in when you're presenting, but some people have put stuff in chat.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Could you read what people put in the chat?
Virginia said bamboo. Brooke said trees. Claire said zebra mussels in the Great Lakes, and Addison said stink bugs.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. There are lots and lots of examples of what we call invasive species animals or plants or other species that do well outside of their native habitat. They do extraordinarily well, so well that we sometimes have a terrible time controlling them. In Florida, there's a particular snake called the Burmese python. It's from a place in the world called Burma. Well, it's not called Burma anymore, but it used to be called Burma when the snake got its name. If you could be a Burmese python, where would you want to live? Answer, not Burma. Florida is where you want to live. It's a lot easier to be a Burmese python in Florida than it is in Burma. And if you do want to raise kangaroos in Texas, it's no trouble. There's endless examples of introduced species who do well in their new environment. So this now presents us with an even deeper puzzle. Camilo's earlier answer to the question, why do things live where they live, was because they're well adapted to where they live. Now we're finding things are sometimes better adapted to where they don't normally live. Crazy, no? All right. Let's see. Let's keep going. So, give me 1 second here. All right. Okay. And then Virginia also offered that things can survive in captivity in places that they're not native to. That's true. Okay. All right. Well noted. All right. Let's move on to the next observation. So here's some examples I have of non-native species. Here at St. Andrews, we have tons of these European starlings. We see Japanese beetles. We definitely see pigeons. If you live in any American city, you probably have seen these things called rock doves, or what you would just call a pigeon. It turns out they're not from North America. So there's lots and lots of examples. Now, what we are particularly going to focus on today is looking at the biogeography of islands, because it turns out that the solution to this mystery, why do some things live where they're well adapted and other things live where they're able to survive but actually can find a better, can find more success elsewhere, okay? The solution to that question has been figured out by looking at islands. All right? And before we start talking about islands, I need to just explain to you an important distinction between two kinds of islands, okay? We can classify all the islands on planet Earth into one of two kinds. One type we call continental islands, all right? Those are places like Long Island or Ireland or other islands that were once part of the continent that they're next to, okay? And the other type of island is called an oceanic island. Hang on 1 second. So oceanic islands are islands that were never part of a continent. So often these are volcanic islands, like the Hawaiian chain of islands here way out in the Pacific Ocean. Never part of a continent. They arose from the ocean floor. Another example right here that we're going to be talking about for sure are the Galapagos Islands. They're volcanic. And when we look at oceanic islands, we find that they are bizarre. So let's look at this for a second. Sorry, yeah, okay, here we go. Has anyone been to an oceanic island? I've been to one. I went to Bermuda with the school's choir. They did a choir tour to Bermuda. Bermuda has never been part of any continent. It's a true oceanic island. When we got off the plane, we had to walk across a mat on the floor that was soaked in bleach so that we wouldn't introduce any seeds or insects or anything that was clinging to our feet to this island. Has anybody else been to an oceanic island? They're hard to get to. They're very hard to get to. I'd never been to one until 2 years ago when I visited Bermuda. It looks like, who's that? Someone else has, I don't see your name. Can you help me with the?
I have.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm pretty sure it's oceanic. I've been to Svalbard, which is above Norway.
Svalbard is a very far northern Ireland in northern Russia. I don't know if it's oceanic. It's a huge island, one of the largest in the world.
Yes. Doesn't it belong to Norway?
Oh, is it Norway? I'm sorry, Norway. It's up there, right next to. Thank you, Norway. Okay. I don't know. I don't. It wouldn't surprise me if it were a continental island.
I don't know which one it is.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. All right, so let's get into what makes oceanic islands weird. Here's a list. Oh, here's a picture showing how oceanic islands often form from volcanoes and are separated from the rest of the land. Okay, now here's a list showing which things we tend to see on oceanic islands and which things tend to be missing. Okay, so if you go to Hawaii or the Galapagos Islands or other examples we could list, what you find is there's a lack of land mammals, with the exception of bats and seals. There's a lack of reptiles. There's a lack of amphibians, and there's a lack of freshwater fish. Now, should we maybe, I don't know, do you guys want to go into breakout rooms to try and figure out why there's this pattern? Why there are plenty of birds, lots of insects and other arthropods, but no, or very, very few mammals, reptiles, amphibians, or freshwater fish. Can anybody immediately see the pattern, or should we go to breakout rooms to discuss that?
I mean, I think the general pattern here is that species have to adapt and evolve to their environments, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will become perfect adaptations and they'll become perfectly like using every opportunity in their environment. So while they might evolve, it's essentially random chance evolution based mainly on genetic mutations that would be more useful. So in these places, those certain things just weren't very useful originally, and now it would take a very long time for them to evolve.
Okay,
if they
so
were to become useful.
Lucas, I hear you saying this. You said a lot of things there, a lot of very accurate and very, very good things. The heart of your argument went like this. Native mammals are absent from Hawaii because Hawaii is not a good place to be a mammal. That harkens back to this beginning of class discussion. That's one explanation for things living where they live is they're adapted to those environments. But if anyone has ever gone to Hawaii, and I haven't, they are very strict about who you bring to Hawaii. Just like in Bermuda, I don't know if they use a bleach pad at the airport, but they restrict heavily that the introduction of species to Hawaii. Don't bring your pet mammal to Hawaii. Hawaii doesn't have native mammals. And when we release native mammals in Hawaii, what do? What do feral hogs do in Hawaii?
They mess up the ecosystem.
Why don't they die right away? Aren't they supposed to be adapted to some other place?
Because they're thriving in that area.
They thrive. Feral hogs are a huge problem. Rats are a problem in Hawaii. They eat bird eggs. The birds don't have the ability to avoid a thing like a rat because they didn't evolve in an environment with rats. So now you introduce rats to Hawaii and it's like food's everywhere. It's a great place to be a mammal. So if Hawaii is a great place to be a mammal, why weren't mammals there all along? And why aren't freshwater fish found?
Didn't get to the islands because like the mammal can't just like walk across the water, and then the fish that are freshwater, they don't really like the salt water, and they had to like get over there somehow.
That's putting it mildly. They like it so little that they would die very soon if they entered it. Okay, yeah, very good, Claire. What about amphibians? How are they going to get to the Oceanic Island? Are there any flying amphibians? There are not. So what's the common thread in the things that are missing on Oceanic Islands? Yes, Christopher.
Things that can't get there by themselves.
Bingo. Bingo. Oceanic islands are lacking forms of life that have difficult time crossing oceans. The only way to get to, think about the formation of the Hawaiian Islands. They started out molten hot. They were lifeless lava eruptions. They were sterile, completely hot and deadly. You could not, I mean, if a fish happened to be stuck on the volcano that erupted, it would have gotten cooked. Everything was cooked in the early days in Hawaii. So how are freshwater fish going to become found in Hawaii? How are mammals, reptiles, amphibians, how will they make it to Hawaii? Well, they might make it. There might be some bizarre occasional introduction, which we'll talk about later, but it's pretty rare, right? Okay, now, okay, so why are we discussing this in a unit about evolution? Because of the next observation. Okay, so let's go back. I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen. And we're gonna talk about not who's missing from Oceanic Islands, but who's present. And what we're gonna find is that Oceanic Islands have lots of things that are missing. So they're missing, all right, let me get a better one. They're missing mammals and reptiles and amphibians and freshwater fish. Except for flying mammals or marine mammals. Flying and marine mammals make it to the island, and that's why we see them on the island, okay? That's what's missing. But then there's also what is overrepresented. So Oceanic Islands have underrepresentation of these kinds of things. And then they have overrepresentation of birds. And some other forms. But let's talk about birds first, okay? You guys ready for that? First question, why would there be lots of birds on Oceanic Islands? Christopher and Camilla both have answers. Let's see, I'll go with Camilla this time. Thanks, Christopher.
Well, birds migrate, and maybe like during warmer weather climate, they migrate to like a warmer place, like Oceanic Island. So,
All right, excellent. Very good. So, or maybe they don't know where exactly they're going during a particularly, what's the word, ill-fated migratory flight. And instead of going to their normal migratory destination, they accidentally land on an oceanic island. Yes? All right. And let's suppose that the oceanic island that they land on is molten hot, then the birds all just simply die. And if they land on the oceanic island that is not molten hot, but cool and plantless, foodless, barren, they also die. But if they land on the oceanic island that has somehow already been colonized by plants and no animals, what's that like for those arriving birds?
A feast.
It's a feast. Why is it a particularly great feast?
Because they're in their thriving environment, so they're
And
the
who
top
are they
dog.
competing with?
Nobody. They're
Right.
top dogs.
Right. Exactly. So some seed-eating bird who's adapted to maybe just eating seeds because there's so much competition where it's from that they had to specialize in having a beak that's really good for eating seeds, all of a sudden finds itself in a place with insects that aren't being preyed upon, with fruit that nobody's eating, with leaves that nobody's eating, with nectar that no one is sucking, and also seeds. They have won the evolutionary lottery or the ecological lottery. Everybody's dream scenario ecologically is to be the first animal to colonize a well-developed plant community on an island without any other animals, right? So what would you predict would happen to the bird species? Let's assume it's a flock so that they can reproduce. What would you expect to happen to the bird population that arrives on one of these Eden-like oceanic islands?
they could overpopulate the island.
Their population would increase. Very good, Camillo. Yeah, their population would increase. What else do you think would happen? Christopher?
Because there's like so much food for them, they would probably like, and when there's so much food, they'll like grow in their population so much that there'll probably be like more mutations. So it may create new birds that are now like competing with each other because the
Okay.
population.
All right, Christopher, you're onto something here. Let's talk about the mutations. What causes mutations to occur? Does anyone in the class have that? Let's take, for example, a seed-eating bird that lands on an island with, let's say, flowers that produce lots of delicious nectar, okay? Does the presence of nectar-containing flowers, the abundant presence of nectar-containing flowers, does that trigger mutations in the seed-eating bird so that they get better at drinking nectar? If you're not a member of the class, oh, wow, Christopher and Camillo are on it. If you are a member of the class, though, we have talked about this, right? Does the abundant presence of nectar-producing flowers trigger a nectar-producing adaptation in seed-eating birds? Does it trigger the mutation that produces the structure that make it good for nectar eating? Everyone is shaking their head, no. No. Mutations occur, what's the word I'm looking for?
Randomly.
Randomly. And we don't know what we might get from that seed-eating initial population. But as that population grows, more and more animals are around, more and more animals are reproducing, more and more opportunities for mutant offspring to arise exist. Are you still with me? And when those mutant offspring do arise, we experience something called, I'll share my screen. Am I sharing my screen with you now? Okay. We experience something called an adaptive radiation. Okay, so observation 5 is that we frequently find on oceanic islands something called an adaptive radiation. So in the case of the Galapagos Islands, one ancestral finch species gave rise to 13 very, very different finch offspring. Insect-eating finches, seed-eating finches, what else? There's flower-eating finches, vegetarian bud-eating finches. That was an adaptive radiation. In Hawaii, there are 50 species of bird called honeycreepers. I've never heard of a honeycreeper, but there are 50 species of honeycreeper in Hawaii. Who do you think was the first bird that arrived to colonize Hawaii? Who was that lucky lottery winner, that ecological lottery winner who first arrived in Hawaii? What do you think?
The honeycreeper.
Probably something close to a honeycreeper. And so what happened to the honeycreepers? They experienced something called an adaptive radiation. Are you with me? Okay, so now I'll just put up a definition now for an adaptive radiation. Oh, well, let's do one more example. Now, Madagascar is an interesting island. Many of you have seen the animated movies about the island of Madagascar. If you have, you know that what form of life is common in Madagascar?
African wildlife.
Okay, it's a part of Africa. It's an island off the coast of Africa. It's been separated from Africa for a very long time, for so long that it is actually technically not an oceanic island, but it is very much like an oceanic island because it has been separated from the continent for so very long. What else? What kind of wildlife do we find in Madagascar?
Lemurs.
Lemurs. Lemurs. Here is a map of the world showing where different kinds of primates live. Monkeys in Central and South America, apes and monkeys in Africa, and lemurs are only in one place. All the lemurs in the world live in Madagascar. More than 100 species of lemur are found in Madagascar. Do you think it's the case that lemurs couldn't survive anywhere else?
No.
Okay, so why so many lemurs in Madagascar? What do you think was on that particular island, the species of primate that was successful at the long time ago?
Maybe because because the mammals couldn't really get over to Madagascar to challenge them, so they were just always top dog.
Okay, yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, there was an absence of other forms of mammalian life, and lemurs underwent an adaptive radiation. They went on to do. Look at this. This is the family tree of lemurs in Madagascar. There are over 100. This is a reduced form. I couldn't fit a picture of the whole family because it's so big. By some estimates, there are 200 or more species of lemur in Madagascar. It's just mind-shattering to think of all that diversity of lemur life. Why is it all in one place? Because of something called an adaptive radiation. So here's more examples. In Madagascar, there are lots of these birds called vanga, probably from a common vanga ancestor. In Australia, lots of forms of marsupial from a founding marsupial group of early occupants of the island. All of these are examples of adaptive radiations. I feel like I had a definition of that somewhere. Do I not? Oh, I know where it is. I wonder if you guys can come up with a definition. What is an adaptive radiation? You've seen so many examples. Can we work on a definition? I'll put it in the chat. An adaptive radiation. Help me out.
Is it just like the evolution of a bunch of different species with one common ancestor?
Ah, very good. Okay, it's when a single common ancestor gives rise to several descendant species. I'm not sure I have all the spelling right there, yeah? I want to add one more feature. Adaptive radiations occur. Well, when do they occur? When do you expect them to occur?
When maybe when there's like a high like amount of like children, like pretty much like a high amount of how can I say this, like a reproduction of a species where like they can thrive.
Yes, when there's an opportunity for lots of offspring to thrive, yeah? But not just lots of offspring, it's key that they not all be the same. Lots of different offspring has the opportunity to survive in lots of different ways so that they become lots of different species. Does that make sense? Okay, so what condition ecologically makes it possible for the variation that exists in a population to lead to, oh, Claire, very good. Claire is putting in the chat, to lead to lots of descendant species. What we're looking for, the ideal conditions for adaptive radiation is when what is true about the ecology of the founding population.
They got there first.
Okay, good, good. And therefore, the ecological roles that could be performed, insect eating, nectar drinking, leaf eating, blood sucking, nut eating, fruit eating, all the different ways of making a living are now laid out in front of them, and no one is taking up those roles. Yeah? We call those unoccupied ecological niches. So the presence of many unoccupied ecological niches is what leads to an adaptive radiation. And we see it particularly often on oceanic islands, which is what you might expect, right? Why would you expect there to be lots of unoccupied ecological niches on oceanic islands? Anyone? Yes,
Not many.
Sorry, Finn. Yeah,
Not many species. Sorry.
Sorry, Quinn. Let's hear from Finn. He's our had his hand up, and love to hear from our guests.
No, it probably because because not many species have really taken up. There aren't as many species to compete because it's not connected to land.
Right, because so darn hard to get there that that there's not a lot of competition. And when continental species are introduced to oceanic islands, what kind of an environment have the continental species been contending with on the continent, Christopher?
Having like rivals on their
Yeah, they've been contending with a highly competitive environment. The continent, that's like Division I football. The oceanic islands are like, Division III cross country. There's just not as much competition on the islands as there ever is on the continent. So when the continental species are introduced on the island, they clean up, they spread, they thrive, they destroy the island's natural, native, endemic species. Yeah? All right, we got 5 minutes left in class. I like to stop 5 minutes early for questions and to let people consolidate the notes they took. Does anyone have any questions? I just really want to appreciate all of the people who participated in today's class. Thank you so much to all the guests, those who participated and those who didn't. Special shout outs to Finn and Christopher and Camilla and let's see, Hunter and let's see, Claire. And thank you for chats from Virginia and Brooke and some of our own homegrown student answers from Cyrus and Quinn and Finn and lots of things to appreciate. Well done, guys. Questions for anyone? Does anyone have any questions for each other or for me? All right. If you're a guest, I don't expect you to consolidate your notes, of course. Why don't I do this? I'm going to create a breakout room that I will go to for if any of the guests want to choose to join me in the breakout room, they can do that. Anyone else, I advise you to stay in this main room and do that work on your notes and for the remainder of the few minutes in class. Okay. I'm in the breakout room. If anybody wants to say hello,
Yo, do we just stay here?
Yeah, Prem, we stay here and do notes, I
Okay.
think.
All right.
Are we supposed to take notes on like the lesson or like the reading?
I don't know.
I think it's just over what we went over, but I'm not really sure that's exactly what we're supposed to go over today. I think they like switched it a little bit with like new students and everything coming. So
I think the overall idea of this lesson was like the idea of evolution and just like species migrating and evolution, and then like, you know, they end up in different parts of the world. So yeah, yeah.
hey everybody, how's it going? Thank you for your work today. Everyone was really nice hosts. Quinn, thank you for letting one of the guests take your spot in the discussion there. That was generous. Yeah, I just thought you guys were great. And I will see you later. Yeah, have a good weekend. All right, bye everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, Virginia. Oh, she already left.